I'm going to talk a little bit about the Boston Red Sox. They dropped another one, game 2 of 2 on the road against the Tampa Bay Rays. 4-3, Patriots. The Red Sox rallied a little bit there late, but still not enough offense. As we've said many, many times, if the Red Sox just had the league average 4.5 runs per game, they would have one of the best records in baseball. Peyton Tolley, not his best performance, but still a good performance, right? He gave up 4 earned runs. That's a bad game for Tolley, but it doesn't matter. In order for the Red Sox to win, you need your pitchers to only give up, in total, across 9 innings, 1 to 2 runs, because you can't expect the Red Sox to score more than a couple of runs, and that's been the real issue. And of course, as we've been harping on, I think a lot of this comes down to Craig Breslow, the GM or whatever his title is in the Red Sox front office. And this news broke yesterday. This comes via Boston.com. I believe Boston Globe ultimately broke it, but I'm sorry. I'm not going behind the paywall and doing all that crap. I'll read Boston.com. But Red Sox reportedly not considering firing Craig Breslow. The club's ownership hierarchy has not even discussed making a change. This comes from Connor Ryan of Boston.com. Quoting Tim Healy of the Boston Globe, who wrote on Monday night, the Red Sox are not considering firing Chief Baseball Officer Craig Breslow. Well, there's your title for you. A team source said on Monday night. Further, amid the team's underperformance and speculation that Breslow may be on the hot seat, the club's ownership hierarchy has not even discussed making a change, the source said. So, Craig Breslow is here to stay. And there were some rumors swirling a little bit last week, over the weekend, that perhaps the Red Sox were finally going to make a change, especially as you head into the middle portion of the season before the trade deadline. You're going to have to make some offseason moves. Big debate about whether it's going to be a fire sale. You're going to get rid of Aroldis Chapman, because what's the point if you're going to have a closer just sitting in the bullpen all game long? Or if they can kind of turn things around a little bit, maybe you add a bat or two. And that's really all this team needs. And we don't know when Roman Anthony's going to be back. We don't know when Garrett Crochet is going to be back, but the pitching isn't the issue. It's the offense. And, if this team can start to get on a little bit of a winning streak, get a little bit closer to 500, especially in the American League, well, then maybe you visit the conversation about making some additions. But I don't trust Craig Breslow to make those decisions. Of course, is it going to be a fire sale? It's starting to lean that way, because the Red Sox are now 11 games under 500 for the first time since 2020. So I don't know why Craig Breslow is even the GM at this point. I don't know why he was the GM heading into 2026. Let's just go through some of the things that Craig Breslow has done during his tenure since assuming that role. Okay, so in December of 2023, you had the Chris Sale trade. Traded to the Braves for Vaughn Grissom. Remember Vaughn Grissom, big contributor. Sale, of course, has excelled since that trade. Won the Cy Young last season. Grissom struggled in Boston and was later moved. It has been cited as a major regret. Okay, so the Chris Sale thing didn't work out. And look, I get it at the time. Chris Sale, he couldn't stay healthy. Had some of the worst luck I've ever seen from a starting pitcher. But you have one of the best left-handers in Major League Baseball. You probably should ride it out a little bit with Chris Sale, considering how it ended up working out afterward. One of the best pitchers in baseball, the best pitcher in baseball, arguably, last season. So you had the Chris Sale disaster. And, of course, last year, you had the Rafael Devers trade, June 2025. This was all because Devers was not happy that they brought in Bregman, and then Bregman, despite being a Gold Glove third baseman, Devers wanted to stay at third, and then they talked about, okay, well, Devers can DH, maybe he can play some first, and Devers didn't like that, and he didn't want to play first base. Of course, now he's playing first base every game for the San Francisco Giants, so that could have worked out had that been managed a little bit better. And a lot of people blame Alex Cora for that, and I'm not saying Alex Cora isn't at fault, but I think a lot of that had to do with communication coming from the front office, which, as we know, is not Craig Breslow's specialty. So they traded Rafael Devers. They brought in Kyle Harrison and Jordan Hicks. I don't think Hicks is around anymore, and Kyle Harrison, of course, was traded this past offseason for a guy who goes by the name of Caleb Durbin, who's been a disaster at third base. Kyle Harrison, meanwhile, similar to when Chris Sale got dealt, is now one of the best Cy Young contending starting pitchers in the National League. So, obviously, that created some friction, alienated the fans, and the return was non-existent. You basically flipped Rafael Devers for Caleb Durbin, who, was allegedly a great fielding third baseman. He's had his moments, but he had a play today that was just horrendous. And, of course, he can't hit the ball in the air outside of the infield. So, Caleb Durbin, been a disaster. You basically flipped Devers for Durbin and got rid of one of the best young pitchers in baseball, who ended up spending most of his time at AAA Worcester. That was also a Craig Breslow decision. Then you had the Alex Bregman situation. Bregman, remember, signed a 3-year, $120 million deal before the 2025 season, but did have an opt-out before 2026, which he took because he had the chance to make even more money. I don't blame him for that. So the Red Sox, of course, made a little bit of an aggressive push, as they say, to sign Alex Bregman and bring him back. But Bregman ultimately left for the Chicago Cubs on a 5-year, $175 million deal. Now, what did the Red Sox offer him? They offered him a 5-year, $165 million deal. So they couldn't give him $10 more million. Mind you, this is across 5 years to come to Boston once again. And the Cubs also sweetened the deal a little bit. There were better terms. There was a no-trade clause, whereas the Red Sox, the deal was filled with a bunch of deferrals and no full trade clause. So I think the Red Sox could have matched the Cubs. They could have said, hey, 5 years, 175, maybe we'll give you 5 years at 180. And that probably would have been more than enough for Bregman. He seemed to enjoy his time in Boston. He was like an additional manager out there. Remember when he got injured, he was coaching up the offense. He was coaching up the pitching staff on hitter tendencies because he's been around the league for a long time. And so you didn't just lose, one of the better bats and one of the better fielding third basemen in the Major League Baseball. You lost a real leader and a guy who could substitute as a manager on the bench, which would have been helpful considering you fired Alex Cora and most of the managerial staff for the Red Sox. So that was a disaster. And then, of course, this past offseason, Red Sox allegedly were in some negotiations with Kyle Schwarber. We remember that didn't work out because Schwarber had a great season with the Red Sox, and then they weren't able to come to terms on a deal. Ended up becoming one of the best left-handed hitters in Major League Baseball after that. So the Red Sox, they dipped their toe in the pool again this offseason. Couldn't come up with a deal with Schwarber. He returned to the Philadelphia Phillies. There was the Pete Alonso disaster. I don't think that even got close. So the Red Sox weren't able to add him as well. What else did Craig Breslow do? There was the Walker Buehler move. They paid him, like $20 million a year or something like that? What was the Walker Buehler? Let me look this up really quickly. Yeah, Walker Buehler. 1 year, $21 million deal. And then, of course, underwhelming production relative to costs and expectations. So that didn't work very well. So that's been the resume for Craig Breslow. And I know we all kind of lump him in with Chaim Bloom, who was also a disaster. He had the Mookie Betts trade, the Trevor Story signing, Masataka Yoshida, who we all love Masa, but he's a one-tool baseball player. He's been injured. He hasn't lived up to expectations, certainly not 5 years, $90 million that he's been paid. The failure to retain Xander Bogaerts. It's all kind of lumped in. Chaim Bloom, Craig Breslow. So we all kind of treat them as one and the same. Of course, only one of them actually has a soul. Breslow, I would say, has actually been a downgrade from Chaim Bloom. And here's this story that broke about a week ago. New Red Sox rumors on Craig Breslow advised to have interpreter by multiple officials. Craig Breslow speaks English, so why does he need an interpreter? Well, according to Tim Healy of the Boston Globe, again, I'm not going to read the story because of the paywall, over the past month, Breslow has made a concerted effort to have more conversations with players and clubhouse level personnel. Part of the point is telling them he cares about them and winning, and he is there to support the team. Okay. People talk externally about not a ton of diversity within the operation in terms of experience, one MLB executive said. Lee continued, the coaching staff has grown frustrated with the state of player development, specifically how much emphasis is placed on swing mechanics and hitting data, often at the expense of fundamentals. The imbalance, coaches believe, traces back to the Chaim Bloom era and is only accelerated under Breslow. So again, one of the same. One has a soul, the other does not. And because of the soulless nature of Craig Breslow, they are considering bringing in like an emotional support human, not an emotional support animal, but an emotional support human that is going to help Craig Breslow. Breslow played 12 years in the big leagues, and that experience was seemingly a selling point when Boston brought him aboard in 2023. He'd ideally convey analytically driven ideas in a way that more traditional baseball people could not understand. So let's see what's going in here. Instead, there's a perception the retired pitcher has leaned more into his Yale self than his player self. People talk externally. I read that already. He's either an extremely principled executive who deploys model-based decision-making, as one friendly put it, or woefully beholden to algorithms, as the less-than-friendlies often do. So, here's what's going on here. Scrolling down the article a little bit more. Euron Little has improved on the front despite Boston firing Alex Cora. They essentially handed Craig Breslow the roles. But they're basically planning on bringing in an interpreter-like figure that's going to help Craig Breslow communicate with the team a little bit. And, one would assume that if you are going to be the head in the front office, the president of baseball operations, the GM, whatever title you're giving, there has to be some level of emotional intelligence there. Some ability to communicate with the players in the clubhouse, with the coaching staff. Obviously, things were rough between Alex Cora and Craig Breslow, and they said, look, it's Cora's fault. It's not your fault, Breslow. It's your show. We'll give you the reins. And this has continued to get worse and worse. And as I mentioned in the track record, nothing really has worked out all that well. It's always been my opinion, although I'm not saying Alex Cora didn't deserve to be fired, but it's always been my opinion that this has been more of a Breslow issue than it was an Alex Cora issue. But at the end of the day, this starts at the top. This starts with ownership. This starts with John Henry, who decided back in 2019, after they won their fourth World Series title under the current ownership, that they're going to focus a little less on trying to win baseball games and a little bit more on diversifying their portfolio. So let's go through John Henry's portfolio a little bit. I know, very exciting stuff here. Liverpool FC. This is in addition, of course, to the Red Sox. It was acquired in 2010 for about $477 million, about $500 million for Liverpool. They have been successful in terms of both performance and financial returns, but of course, that's diverting attention away from the Boston Red Sox. They took a controlling stake of the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2021 for a $900 million evaluation. It's a financial win for the Fenway Sports Group, but the on the ice results have not really panned out in Pittsburgh. No Stanley Cups, number of playoff misses, and early exits when they did make the playoffs. Of course, they've been involved in the racing world since 2007. Started as Roush Fenway Racing. Now it's RFK Racing, I would assume named after the head of Health and Human Services. 50% stake in RFK Racing in NASCAR. Competitive, but not really a dominant racing group. Also really has not been a bigger financial need for them. It's just kind of a steady diversification play. Of course, Boston Globe reacquired in 2013 for $70 million because print journalism, as we know, is on the ascension. So that was something that John Henry did. But all of this is taking away from the Boston Red Sox and the desire to win baseball games. And I think the way John Henry looks at it is, look, we have Fenway Park. We have the mecca of baseball in the entire world. Fans want to come here from all over the globe to see games. We're going to fill the stadium to a certain extent, if not with our fans, with fans from the visiting team. And at a certain point, it's diminishing returns on investment for the Red Sox. So that's kind of been the attitude for John Henry, and a big reason why they're not pumping money into getting a big bat, not willing to spend, even if they're willing to spend $165 million on Bregman, we're going to defer a lot of that money because inflation down the road, it's not going to cost as much then. And, we can't give him another 10 to 15 million more across 5 years and give it to him actually during the next 5 years because I don't know what reason. Because, the Chicago Cubs just care a little bit more than we do. I'm going to be on the plane to Liverpool. So, look, we want John Henry to succeed in these business ventures because the more revenue, or rather the more profit he's able to generate, the likelihood that he is able to pour more resources into the Red Sox, but it just doesn't seem like a priority. So I do think Henry, he shouldn't abandon this strategy. I know the calls for selling the team, that's not going to happen. Why would you sell the Boston Red Sox if you're still putting butts in seats, if you're still a profitable team, increasing profits year over year? It's just not going to happen. He's fine with the booing and all of that stuff. He hardly ever talks to the media. He runs away at times. So at this point, I think all we can do is root for John Henry to continue to diversify and find ways to bring in more profit, because then maybe he will, throw a bone to the Boston Red Sox a little bit more. And that's why I do have a bit of a recommendation here for John Henry. As we all saw in the Kentucky Derby and in the Belmont Stakes, Golden Tempo, really an incredible performance. I wish that horse ran the Preakness, but did an excellent job. Literally going from last place to first place in both the Derby and the Belmont, and a little upset. Like I say, he didn't run the Preakness. She didn't run. It's a he horse? I'm not sure. But that horse was definitely Triple Crown savvy. And I'm not saying that horse racing should be the space that John Henry goes into, but I think horses in general is a strong diversification strategy for John Henry. So if you've never heard of this sport, it's called dressage, which is short for horse ballet. And I think this is the ultimate solution for the Fenway Sports Group diversification strategy and finding a way to generate more profit so that maybe perhaps they can throw a bone to the Boston Red Sox and actually bring in a strong right-handed bat, not just in a midseason deal, but during the offseason when it comes to outbidding the other 29 MLB teams. Look at this sport. Look how exciting this is. Dressage, horse ballet. This was one of the best performances. Glitz and Glamourdale. I'm not sure which one's Glitz and which one's Glamourdale. I would assume the jockey or whatever you call it in dressage is one of those names. But I think there is a real untapped opportunity here for John Henry to diversify Fenway Sports Group and really expand that portfolio and bring in more I mean, look at the stands there. A ton of people into this. Would you watch this? Of course I would. I mean, this is much more exciting than horse racing. I think this is the better strategy and something that makes you really think that, hey, if John Henry is willing to make this investment in dressage, horse ballet, then perhaps I'm going to feel a little less bad at Fenway Park when I'm spending $18 for the Samuel Adams Thunder Hops beer or whatever it's called. $18, totally worth the price at Fenway Park if you know it's going not just to NASCAR, not just to ice hockey, not just to the Liverpool Football Club, which of course nobody in Boston or America actually cares about. There's been very little hype about the World Cup. I'm actually a little excited for the World Cup. But this is exciting. And this will have me saying, I don't need to spend $18. I'll make it a double. I'll spend $30 on a drink just so John Henry can have the money to invest in something as valuable and as high of an upside return as horse ballet. So I think this is ultimately the right move. John Henry, if you're listening, which I'm sure he is, horse ballet. I think that is the future of Fenway Sports Group. Maybe, you sell a stake in NASCAR, you sell a stake of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and you get in on this, and you find a way to make it work. Dressage, horse ballet, John Henry. I believe John Henry was also the name of a famous horse at one time. So a lot of parallels there. He's certainly in the twilight. He's over the hill, if you will, at this point in his life. Probably thinking a little bit about, the estate, the potential inheritance. And, if I'm in the will of John Henry, this is something that I want to inherit. I want to inherit. Look how graceful that is. Just incredible. This is the best of the best, by the way. This is as good as it gets in dressage. I wish I were John Henry's son, because this would be I would be pushing for this every single day for the Fenway Sports Group to continue to diversify and find a way to make the Fenway brand expand a little bit into the world of horses. Not horse racing, not the Kentucky Derby, Preakness, or Belmont. None of that stuff. I think this is the untapped future. This isn't just ESPN 8, the Ocho material. This is NBC bidding hundreds of millions, perhaps billions for network coverage to cover dressage, horse ballet. I think, John Henry, you have a real amazing opportunity here to make this work out. So, really great to see that. And I do have an MBA, so I know what I'm talking about. And I think the more profit that John Henry can generate, the more, as I've said, he can put toward the Red Sox and getting that right-handed bat. Watch that horse and start thinking about trading for Mike Trout, right? That's what I watch that horse dance around, and I think Mike Trout. That's what I think. So hopefully, John Henry, you can listen to some of this advice and help bring the Red Sox back from the ashes, and that starts with horse ballet.